Good afternoon, everyone. I know quite a few of you, or have met many of you over the years in the North American HDYO camps. It's wonderful seeing everybody here in this context. Look, this next half hour has a lot of challenging stuff, but it's really important to keep in mind life is never intended to be anything. It is what it is. We have an opportunity as we live our lives to make the most of it each and every day. Grief is a part of life. And it's not only, the comic book, superficial, this is what we are or who we are sort of thing. Coping with loss. How do we choose to cope with loss, and what is loss? All too often, we tend to think that grief is when we lose someone to death, right? That's the most common thing that we talk about in the world at large. But in the HD community, and frankly in many others, it's not only death that takes away from us and that we grieve. But keep in mind, it's not just the issue of grieving, because grieving is only half of the process. The other half is healing. The other half is thriving. And how is it that we do this? Well, I've been a psychiatrist, I've been a physician for a very long time. And one of the real issues that I've learned over the years is that most of us have a hard time even really understanding and working with our emotions. Giving name to the experiences we have and accurately knowing how we're feeling empowers us. It allows us to take control of how we can respond to how we feel. We can't really control how we feel, but we can sure control how we react to it. We can choose what we focus on. We can choose how we behave. And so the grief disrupts or challenges our sense of normalcy. It includes the loss of connections that define us. Every day in the perfect world, we wake up and we feel exactly the same way we did as the day before. We feel fine, we feel good, but that's a fantasy. Every day is different. And every day we feel, and we can feel deeply. Part of the challenge is if we get scared of what we feel, we become more numb. And all that happens then is we lose out on the opportunity to live. Because we don't live yesterday. We don't live tomorrow. All we live is right now. And so living with a family member who has HD or living with the risk of it is, look, it's challenging. It can be incredibly disruptive and anxiety-provoking. It can be many, many different things. And one of the issues for us to recognize is that we can grieve many different things over the course of a day. So grief and loss experienced by folks who are impacted or affected, particularly affected by HD, goes beyond the typical stages of grief and loss. And it really involves a changing dynamic because the disease progresses for each individual and the way the family responds in turn changes. So there are lots of different kinds of grief. One of them that is even, is painful in many ways is anticipatory grief. You're already grieving before something happens because you're anticipating what you're going to lose. So even before it's happened, you're already suffering. So it's feeling the loss before it happens. And in HD, this can be as soon as you know the diagnosis, your own or a family member's, or at any given stage of the illness as one or another issues, symptoms, functional impairments occur. So yes, this can occur, or it can be the fear of it. We cannot at this stage yet control the progression of the illness, but we can recognize our responses to it and our ability to deal with it, because those are our choices. There's the chronic stress of living in a family with HD, the ongoing care and support required for a loved one. It can be burnout. This can include young people who are prematurely thrust into the role of an adult caregiver, denying you the potential opportunity to lead an otherwise normal childhood, inviting your friends over, going out, doing all those other things so many of your other peers appear to be able to do. All of these are opportunities for grief and loss and frustration. They're also opportunities for growth and understanding. There are all sorts of additional stressors for those who are people at risk, those who are positive but not symptomatic. There's a loss of time. There's a loss of the future. Again, an anticipatory kind of a fear, right? It hasn't happened. It may not happen. Look, I mean, look, I'm a doctor, lots of black humor. Any of us could be hit by a bus later today, right? We don't know what's going to happen later today, tomorrow, in a month, in a year. We can worry about one outcome that will never happen. All we can do is control and manage what we live now. And that is a real challenge when it comes to understanding what grief is, and the fact that it's important not to ignore it or to deny it, but to embrace it, because as we do, we can then learn to live our lives. Living in an HD family can have a serious emotional toll. Watching a loved one decline can evoke feelings of helplessness, sadness, frustration. Family members may experience anxiety and depression as they cope with the changes. This is nothing new to anyone in this room. But acknowledging it is important, and recognizing it as a shared experience is important, and recognizing that how you react to it, how you choose to react to it, is within your ability. You know, we may have, because of our requirements, we may need to be at home to care for someone. We may need to have responsibilities that others may not. That may limit our social or professional growth. It may include or expand a sense of isolation. We're dealing with lots of uncertainty. Someone may or may not be willing to or able to go on a planned trip until the last minute. We don't know. We deal with lots of uncertainty. Depression, anxiety, trauma is part of our lives now. But that doesn't mean we don't have control over how we live our lives and how we experience it. Being here is an enormous step in taking control of your life and shaping the path of grief, healing, and thriving. Not just recovery, but recovery in many ways means just getting back to where you were. But for most of us, the goal isn't just doing that. It's living a vibrant, joyous life. And everyone in this room can do that in this moment. And when we share our experience, we gain emotional support one to the other. And I would argue that that is what really living is. So we can assert control of our lives and the process of healing while we grieve in many ways. We've already heard from Dr. Bonnie about different approaches to self-care. And I can only encourage you to really lean into those opportunities to take care of yourself. It matters. It makes a huge difference, because when you are grounded, when you have taken care of yourself, you're eating well, you're exercising, you're sleeping, you can care for others. You can make a difference in your world and the broader world in ways that you otherwise would not be able to. Here's a real challenge. A lot of us are scared to speak openly about our fears, about HD, to each other. And sometimes we create barriers within our own families by not feeling that we can share HD. And you'll hear much more about that as the Congress progresses. But open communication is the way to building solid relationships that will weather challenges and grief. Being able to confront the things you fear the most in your families, in your chosen families, matters. We go through lots of role changes. Family roles will shift. You know, someone who had been a child takes on the role of parent. That can happen. And it doesn't necessarily happen just once. It can evolve over time. And so when those caregiving responsibilities shift, it can lead to resentment. It can lead to all sorts of concerns. I don't know what I'm doing. What am I supposed to do? Talking with each other and with this community gives us access to knowledge and strength that we otherwise would never have by ourselves. Relationships can be strained, and certainly in caregiving relationships, we can feel isolated, we can feel frustrated, and yet we can feel a profound sense of joy in loving someone that deeply, in a caring, committed way that goes beyond what most people may, in an otherwise, quote, normal relationship ever have a chance to experience. So it's important never to stuff those feelings down, to ignore them, or to deny that they exist. They're real. And the more you acknowledge them, the more you build your vocabulary of speaking about them, the more you will have control over how you will function and how you will be able to lead a meaningful, powerful, joyful life. So it's really important to become skilled at knowing how you feel, as opposed to trying to ignore it and just trying to get on with the next task. You aren't alone. And just look around you at the people you've met, at the people you just spoke with, and with whom you will be speaking soon. We care about each other. We will be here for each other. And in that sense, we can heal and we can grow. And so with this, I think there are going to be a lot of different opportunities. The Congress was designed to provide you not just with information, but with connections and with tools. Years and years ago, the old joke in psychotherapy was just, it's just talking. What else is it? But psychotherapy, when it's done well, is empowering people with new tools. That's all. Making people aware of new options, giving them new insights into ways in which we can function and take more control over our lives. And a lot of those tools you will find in the next few days here. Just navigating relationships. There are a lot of opportunities for very toxic relationships in this world. And it's important to recognize them, and it's important to recognize what a positive relationship means and what it is, how to seek it and how to build it. Cultural exchange. Each of our nations, each of our communities has different resources, strengths, and it's important to recognize that we can find what we need by communicating across all of these different borders. And as we go through testing, for those who choose to go through testing, it's important to get insight from those who have lived through this, those who have gone through testing and have had a positive gene response, a gray zone response, a negative response, and those who've chosen not to be tested. Everyone is here and can share those stories and will share those stories with you. Just how do you talk about HD to others? Those are things you can learn in ways that make it simple, make it straightforward so you feel comfortable sharing with others who are interested in learning. So much of overcoming barriers is just opening up and talking with others, because frequently people are scared to ask, but once you break down the barrier to let them know that it's okay, talking about HD can be far less painful than you might otherwise think. Dual perspectives, which we already mentioned, will be discussed in much more detail. Impacts of being a young caregiver. Look, this is hard. It's painful, and it's important to know that you are not alone, that many have shared living experiences, and together you can find different strategies to prosper and thrive. All the different barriers, psychological and otherwise, in HD are very real. But most of the things that exist in HD in terms of the psychology, the logic, the emotional distress exists as part of the human experience. And those things that empower us to live with and through HD empower us to be wonderful human beings. And you are not defined by any one thing. You're not defined by your religion, by your gender, by your nationality, and you're definitely not defined by HD. And so it's really important to recognize that, and we only really get it when we talk with each other to understand different perspectives. And how do we overcome stigma? By talking, by sharing our stories, because humans live by storytelling. That's who we are. That's what we do. So we will also have afternoon group discussions that are not recorded to talk about life after testing, living at risk, survivor's guilt, that's real, and coping with that and what it means. How do you really thrive, and how do you become a positive voice in your family and in your community? So with that, I hope I did not overwhelm. I hope that this wasn't as negative as the title made it out to be. I think that grief is a part of the human experience. It is in some ways distilled and refined into a fine art in the HD community. But there's a lot of fine art in the HD community that goes way beyond grief. So I want to thank everyone for your attention. And let me just turn it over. I don't know how much time there is for any. Great. So comments, questions, snide remarks? I'm open.
What's a good way to start to get into therapy and talk about things?
So how is it that you can get into therapy? 1,000 different ways. You know, and again, each country is very different in this. But if it is part, you know, for some, they get into therapy through a religious group, and to their religious leaders, others through more formal medical approaches. In many countries, you will be able to just ask for it either through a primary care doc or directly to a therapist. And there's an interesting issue because the more clear you are about what you need, the easier it will be to find a therapist who can actually help you. Because unlike potatoes, therapy is very individual. And so it's really important to recognize that you should be the one in control. You're not giving up control when you're in therapy. It's just the opposite. If someone isn't doing it for you, find a different therapist. You need to work with someone who empowers you and gives you what you need. You may be initially someone who wants someone who's going to be giving you structure and guidance and support, giving you specific tools. You may be looking for someone who will listen to you and just give you support and occasional guidance. There is no one approach to therapy. And so it's really important in your own environment. You know, even now, in many nations and many parts of the world, online therapy is a thing. And you may be able to do that. One caveat, though, and this is a real problem, at least in the States. There are chatbots who are now masquerading as human therapists, and they don't always end well. So it's important to understand that if you are doing therapy, and it's a thing to do therapy online. How many people live in countries where you can do therapy online? Okay, so yeah, it's a thing. So it's important to recognize that sometimes there may be misinformation, so it's really important to know what you're getting into.
I think if I can add to, that's where associations can be really powerful as well, because they can help connect you with some people who understand Huntington's disease as well. You can reach out to HDYO and we can help get you connected to localized resources. There are always options, but I think that's a very important question for how do you even start the process of going through therapy and seeking support.
And I'm sorry, I overstated the obvious. HDYO is a great first place to go to for guidance when it comes to, specifically therapy when it relates to what you're going through. Other questions? In the back, please.
Question around the anticipatory grief. Granddad passed away and witnessed mum pass away, and then with the knowledge of 3 siblings who are positive and potentially 2 more, I struggle to break that down into terms of something that's copable, that's somewhat terrifying looking into the next 40 plus years with the knowledge that I have. So, yeah, how do I begin to break that down and sort of, as you said, do one day at a time or something like that?
So, given the state of did everyone hear him? So given the state of the world right now, you can pick and choose what anticipatory grief you want to focus on. Will there be World War III next week? There's all sorts of concerns that we have globally and in each country as political changes are fomenting everywhere. For our individual anticipatory grief, the issue really is, what do you have control over? You have literally no control over what happens tomorrow. All you really have is how you are going to control your behavior right now. And so the opportunity for us is to learn tools. And as Dr. Bonnie said, there are lots and lots of different tools for grounding yourself, being in the moment. And that's another way of thinking about it. We want to live in the moment so that we can plan for the future. But all we can do is live now. When we feel overwhelmed by anxiety, by anticipating what's going to happen, we can learn tools to cope with what we choose to focus on. And in different forms of psychology, there are many, many different tools, cognitive behavioral therapy tools, to focus on positive things and not to focus on the catastrophes that might happen. For some, it's so overwhelming they really can't just focus using therapeutic or psychological tools, and for some, it's a formal anxiety disorder or other major depression, which requires medication. So both tools, there are many, many tools that we can use. When it's extreme, medication may be of real value, but for so much of this, using, whether it's simple focusing techniques, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 drills, breathing techniques, progressive relaxation, things that just block out all of those other things so we focus on the one thing we can control, which is right now and what you choose to think about. So you may not be able to choose how you feel, but you can choose what you think about. And that's what a lot of the psychology focuses on. Does that make sense? Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Megan. I wanted to just comment on one of the things that you said, which was being open with other people about HD, because I grew up in a family, my mom had HD in the 80s and 90s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, and we never, ever talked about it. I think that was the culture back then. I think the culture is much different now with all of you young people, but there still is that stigma about not talking about it. And in my later years, after my mom had passed away and my sister and my brother both experienced HD, I found that even strangers were just, they knew that there was something going on with my brother and my sister. And once they understood that this was a disease and that there wasn't anything to be afraid of, they wanted to know more, and they just were really interested in the story. And I just want to comment one of the things that you said about talking to people, breaking down barriers, and because people want to know. Somebody said to me once, "What's different about your sister?" Because I didn't want to say anything, but of course they knew. And I found that for the most part, once I started opening up about HD and sharing with strangers, that people were very kind for the most part and very compassionate. And I just wanted to share that and comment about what you had said.
Thank you. And it's also very much the case now that there's another powerful transition that's occurring in terms of reducing stigma. Yes, we're talking about it much more. There are enormous efforts of advocacy to be able to bring it out of the darkness and hidden. It's that there's now much more hope that the world is going to be different, that the course of the illness will be different. All of these new molecules that are now being developed and tested to change the outcome of the illness. So that is a profound change that we are now living through that makes an enormous difference in the future of the generation in this room. So I'm really, really excited about that, because that also contributes to the change in the conversation in the years ahead.
I want to talk about the living will. So, in general, anyone should have a living will, and it's about should I be on machines to be alive, to be still alive, or kept alive via machines. So what I have experienced with my mother 4 or 5 years ago is we haven't had that will, but it was good. I got a call at night at 1 a.m. at night. Should we stop the machines? Because we had to put her in machines. And it was my choice to let her live, because maybe there's a chance, or additionally, it was great to say goodbye while she was breathing and warm. So next day in the morning, we went there. Via the pandemic, we could go in pairs, could go in, and then with a psychologist or a pastor, we were able then in the group to say goodbye to her and switch off the machines, and then let her sleep. And hopefully she was able to feel us in this moment and hear us. So that's maybe my advice, what I could give. Don't go there and say goodbye in a cold room where she is kept cold. So that would be an advice, to put that at least in the living will. We want to go there and switch it off together. Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Melissa. Talking about anticipatory grief, one thing I found that's really helpful. So I tested gene negative. I grew up with my mom symptomatic, caregiving for her when I was really young. And I found that growing up in like catastrophe and turmoil, that I really love having control over things. So that has been a major lesson to relinquish some control and realize what's within my power or not. I have all three of my siblings are gene positive, 2 are symptomatic. I'm a caregiver for the oldest one, and my wife is at risk. Couldn't get enough of HD in my life, so so lots of anticipatory grief over a lot of things. And one thing that the two of us have agreed on in terms of her gene status, and something that I've taken with me across all my HD relationships, is that I really have to be able to acknowledge what I'm feeling. I have to give it space. And if I don't, then it bottles up and I end up having a panic attack down the road. So I feel like that's been something very helpful for me. I'm a very talk it out person, so if I can look to her and say, like, hey, today I thought about, like, what if you're gene positive, and what if you get sick, and we have a kid, and I'm also taking care of my brother, and like you, and, you know, and, but we're able to always talk about it in a way that, like, I told her I never want to be the reason that you decide to test, like, to alleviate something in me. Like, I just want to be able to acknowledge it. So we do that, and we talk about it if we need to, or if we don't, we put on a musical and drink wine, or, you know, whatever else that we have to do. So I think giving space for the feelings is really important, and learning to give up some control and finding your people. Like when people are like, hey, if there's anything I can do, let me know. Let them know. Ask them. My brother texted me yesterday and said he can't open up his bottle of pills. So I texted a friend that lived nearby. I'm like, can you just stop at his apartment and literally open his bottle of pills for me? And they're like, sure. I'm like, okay, that was easy. So ask for help.
Something that we frequently overlook is that when we ask other people for help, we give them an opportunity to build a relationship that matters to them as well. Most of us feel really good when we can help someone else. And so frequently we're feeling like we're, intruding on them. Could be, but until you ask, you never know, and it's a great way to build a relationship if you do.
Something that helps me with dealing with anticipatory grief is kind of like what Melissa said, is like physical caregiving. in a sense, so my mom has HD. And ever since, like, I was young, I was a caregiver and I didn't know it. And she's like now in she's in like later stages. She's still able to like talk for the most part and like everything, but she's in a long-term care facility, and she has a great support and care team, and they always call me and like FaceTime me when they're with her. But because I do go to university 2 hours away from her, so and I live on campus there. But it's nice. I find it like no matter how like mentally exhausting it can be, I feel like I get more reward out of like driving to see her once every couple weeks and being able to physically like caregive for her, especially because like kind of that sense of control again, like it's like the simplest little things. Like if I feel like they didn't like wash her hair good enough, or I feel like they didn't like clean her room good enough, or like, you know, stuff like that, then I will go and like redo those things, and it makes me like feel like I'm doing something that I can control and something that I'm like doing to, I guess, help the situation, you know?
Maybe one word that we don't use often enough is love. And, you know, we express love in many different ways, but physical caregiving is a profound way of doing just that. All the way in the back.
One thing I didn't think about like a year ago, was the grief after testing positive. I didn't think about the life that I was gonna lose. So basically, I thought of my life as being negative or continuing to live at risk, and then versus the positive. And once I knew my once I knew that I tested positive, the life of being negative or at risk was forever gone, and I was never going to get that back. I'm never going to get that back. I wasn't expecting, or I didn't think about that before I went through testing. And I think acknowledging that has been really important, and talking through all the feelings after that has been really important. Yeah, because it's really complicated. But just because my life didn't go the direction that I wanted to, doesn't mean that my life being positive isn't worthwhile and isn't going to be a good life.
I want to emphasize the last few words that you just said. Anyone else? Yeah.
One of the things I always tell everyone, especially like testing positive for HD and then having children, and not doing like any genetic testing for pregnancy, but I always say my life is not less valuable because I am HD positive. So if that helps anyone, I tell myself that all the time, anytime I'm going through something bad, so.
It is, what you're hearing, I think, and just from people's responses, life is complicated. There are no guarantees about anything except being alive in this moment making decisions that can empower ourselves and the people we love for the better. And so that is where we live, in the moment, and planning for the future, loving those we care about, building relationships, learning more so that our lives can be richer and more full, building relationships. All of those things are things under our control, whether we have genetic risk factors for schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, cystic fibrosis, cancer, or Huntington. All of those things are real, but so too is the joy of living each and every day. I want to thank you guys for being here and being brave enough to show up. Have a great day today.